Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and today we're going to do something a little bit different. You see, if you're more used to CA and Total War, this might sound a bit strange to you. However, as a long-time Warhammer fan, growing up with Games Workshop products and knowing exactly how they do their weird business practices, this holds a lot more weight. It's a rather strange thing, but as you can imagine from the title, we're going to be talking about the Naga of Khuresh. I'll explain in detail what exactly they are in just a few minutes, but first let's jump into a Warhammer 3 loading screen, as this is the main reason of this video. Obviously, creators such as myself are now streaming Warhammer 3, posting videos and so on, and loading screens pop up with little tidbits of lore throughout the universe. This one is rather curious for one reason. Let's read it over. Those in the central provinces always look to the north, to the grandstanding of my sister at the Great Bastion. Meanwhile, I must marshal the burning winds, defend our borders against the Nagas and Serpents of Khuresh, keep peace with the Tigers of Ind, and war with the Monkey King's legions that come down from the mountains of heaven. I'm not sure if you guys realize why this is so important, but if you're used to Games Workshop, you probably already know. You see, the Nagas originally were written as N-A-G-A-S. You know, Nagas or Naga as N-A-G-A. Now it looks like they're going to be N-A-G-G-A-S or N-A-G-G-A. Now, this might not seem like a lot to Total War fans and so on, but anyone who's used to Games Workshop, specifically more around 5 years ago onwards, this is them in their weird attempt to copyright something. It's usually how they just add in a letter or an apostrophe, and now it's copyrightable because it's a unique word to them. Many hobbyists will remember that famous time when they tried to copyright the word Space Marine, despite the fact that term existed long before Games Workshop was even a thing. They obviously lost that court case because, yeah, you know, logic and reason prevailed. But if we look towards Warhammer Fantasy, they did try to copyright the word dwarf, and, well, that obviously didn't work. Now, if you look towards those races in Age of Sigmar, they changed the names to be more copyrightable, so elf has been changed to Aelf. They've just added an A in front. Dwarf, they changed to Dwarden because they couldn't copyright dwarf. As a funny note, the Space Marines are more commonly referred to Adeptus Astartes because that's copyrightable rather than just Space Marine, and this is a common thing. Games Workshop really love to defend their IP despite their IP not being that unique. Yeah, I know, I'm a big Warhammer fanboy, but even I can say it. A lot of stuff is just pretty much ripped from either our own real history or anyone else. So by simply adding in another letter to N-A-G-G-A, now this is a unique word and it's copyrightable. So now we have the Naga of Khuresh. Why would the name change at all if there's no intention of bringing it in? Now that it's a copyrightable name, it's very possible that this means that we'll see the Naga of Khuresh in the Total War Warhammer series, and most likely in Old World, because they've changed the name. If they hadn't changed anything, I'd say, yeah, it's not coming. When I've done speculations in the past, I've always said, yeah, I would like Cafe, I would like Ind, I would like this and that, but I always put the Snakemen as a lower chance, possibly even never even coming, but a name change to a more copyright-friendly thing just makes it seem like this is very, very possible. Keep in mind, a long time ago, all these races and so on were planned for Warhammer Fantasy, it's just they were in a pile, and Games Workshop are kinda lazy. This is why you don't see a lot of model updates for a lot of factions, and they only go for their shining stars. But again, a copyright-friendly name kinda changes that. And you have to keep in mind this, a lot of people will be saying, no, it's Total War who decides the races or not. And yes, the people at CA will decide, well, we want Cafe and all that, but then it has to be confirmed by Games Workshop. Do you really think that a company like Games Workshop, which is so anally retentive, are going to allow another company to make new units and so on without their supervision? This was in fact confirmed with the whole Grand Cafe articles that yes, they came up with everything and then they allowed CA to start working on other stuff. Obviously I could be wrong, but pretty much anyone who's grown up with Games Workshop or Games Workshop products and seen Games Workshop themselves do some rather questionable and downright stupid things at times know that this pretty much makes sense. I was talking to some other long-standing creators that know Warhammer and Games Workshop as a whole, and they think that my theory has quite a bit of weight. Anyways, let's not talk about GW and copyright anymore, as anytime I feel like I'm talking about it, it feels like there's some sort of sniper pointing at my head, so let's move on to some obvious specifics that we need to talk about. So let's talk about some specifics to Warhammer 3 and some other things about the race. Firstly, and obviously, the hinterlands of Khuresh themselves are not in the Warhammer 3 map. We already know that, mainly because Cafe for some reason is very squished up, though I imagine that eventually we'll start to see some sort of map expansions because, well, they're probably going to want to milk Grand Cafe for as much as possible, specifically because of the Monkey King and the other 3 active dragon children, and their territories aren't in the map at the moment. We know that Cafe is going to be a cash cow for them. We know this. It's going to be there to be marketed to the Eastern nations and so on, because this is obviously something that Games Workshop themselves have stated when it comes to their financial reports, and we know that Creative Assembly have been doing the same, because that's why Three Kingdoms was a thing. Plus, if you look at the lore dump that myself and Lore Master Sotek had with Andy Hall, the principal writer of Warhammer 3, when he was reading the Cathayan army book that was written by Games Workshop, a lot of different things were established for Grand Cafe, which we're not seeing in game just yet. Loads of different other styles of units, some different types of monsters and so on that were given a brief mention, so we pretty much know that Cathayan DLC is on the way. It's just a matter of time at this point. Map expansions are obviously not out of the question, because we've seen it with Three Kingdoms when they introduced the Naga. We were going to possibly get one with the whole Northern Lords thing, but that never happened because I don't know. I'm still really pissed off about that, in all honesty. And then obviously we've seen map expansions happen with the Mortal Empires for Warhammer 2, so it's very much possible that we can have that, or they could decide to do like a mini campaign. We're seeing the return of that in a certain sense, but only for multiplayer at the moment, where it introduces Khuresh in its own dedicated campaign, which then allows you to play them in the Immortal Empires and so on. It could work, as it's not entirely out of the question, though I don't know, we're going to have to wait and see. I'm not a developer, so I don't know exactly how this could work. Dedicated campaigns could be interesting to introduce more races and factions that might not be able to fit there because, well, let's be honest, a lot of established races and factions from Warhammer 1 and Warhammer 2 would not be able to fit in the Realm of Chaos campaign. That's the standard campaign for Warhammer 3 at the moment, due to the fact that, well, there's no room, none of their spaces are there and so on. Yes, they can work some stuff around, but it's already incredibly cramped. This is also a way to do a workaround, so you can still implement stuff, and it's not specific to just the Mortal Empires, which would require free games, which I had a theory about that. It was already debunked. They said that they have no intention of doing that and so on, yet we've already had that with Dryker, just saying. But the reception to Dryker, the fact that you need both games and a lot of DLC to be able to play her, that could mean that they just decided they're not going to do that again, which I would understand. I thought it was a good system, but then again, it is quite costly. I know you can get the game for cheaper and so on. That was an argument for a lot of people, but it's still, for newer people into the series, it does become a bit of an issue. So let's talk about Khuresh itself, as there's a lot to discuss. If you want to read the lore of Khuresh, you're going to have to possibly go on the Warhammer Fantasy Wiki. That's probably the best option for yourself at the moment, considering the fact that Khuresh has very little mentions in lore. There's a decent page there on the wiki. That's mainly because, yes, they've been mentioned since around, I want to say around 5th edition, possibly even sooner, but it's like 1 or 2 lines in various different books. If you want to actually read all the proper lore, you're going to have to get, well, a library's worth. It's ridiculous how so much stuff was spread out. Pretty much how it worked for Grand Cafe. So the Snakemen itself existed around 3rd edition, but they only had some miniatures and that's pretty much it. No background was given until around 5th or 6th, and it was pretty much kind of lumping them onto the Chaos factions. They were known as Chaos Snakemen. That changed later on. I think Games Workshop were trying to then establish them as their own actual thing. See, the Hinterlands is a territory, it's a rather large country, right in the southern parts of the Warhammer Fantasy world, which borders that of Grand Cafe, and we know next to nothing about these territories. That's the thing. We know pretty much, well, like a pamphlet's worth of lore. What we know is that the hinterlands themselves are full of jungles and so on, and the main inhabitants are that of Snakemen and the nightmarish Blood Naga. These are the rulers of the Snakemen, though it's never really been outright confirmed. There's been a thing where they say they are, then some things kind of suggest that they're their own thing. But if we go by a whole mythological aspect and so on, it could be that the Blood Naga are just the outright rulers of the Snakemen, which makes the most sense, and I think it's how it kind of goes with the most canon lore. Humans live in the area but are mostly slaves and hunted as prey, and there used to be some high elf colonies. They could still be, but they are heavily reduced as the Snakemen have been quite aggressive. There's also a lot of beastmen in this region, but, well, there's beastmen everywhere in the Warhammer Fantasy world. But going off a pure hypothetical, I could see it done as the following. You'd see Blood Nagas being introduced as legendary characters and obviously lord choices too, being a spellcaster or also melee type with access to a new lore of magic, possibly something as the lore of blood or the lore of souls. That kind of fits with the whole aesthetic and lore that we know of the Snakemen and the Blood Nagas so far. with other laws of magic, including the law of death, the law of shadows, because it needs to have some other different types of stuff to be competitive at the very least. And then, you know, Snakemen would form the main brunt of your stuff. You know, we've already got some Snakemen miniatures which they can base off, which would be your chaff and your high tier infantry and so on. They could have access to poisonous spitting attacks as a type of weapon, bows, armor to be a higher tier infantry and all that, with some human slaves as some form of chaff. Big snake-like monsters and so on, which isn't out of the question for the Warhammer Fantasy universe because, I mean, you know, we have big dinosaurs, so why not snakes? Obviously, going into the mythological and deity side of that, of various different cultures from our real world in the eastern regions of our world. So, you know, the usual thing that Games Workshop does, where hippity-hoppity, this is now my property, change its name a little bit, and it's mine now. I mean, that's pretty much the whole premise of Warhammer Fantasy. It's our real world in a grim, dark Warhammer Fantasy setting. They just changed some stuff around, and it's now something unique. Well, it's not, but they call it unique. Again, we'll talk about the Warhammer 3 map just in case, because I want to hammer this on. If you look at the orientation, it's actually tilted. Cathay is further north than what it should be, just because of how the map is actually placed. This, I believe, was done in a very smart way, because that means that they can expand into further Cathay with map expansions without needing to go down into the Badlands to then add in more territories there. This means they can keep pushing and pushing further east, which could in theory add in as much of Cathay as they need, but as they move into those territories, they need to start adding in Ind and a little bit of Khuresh. It's just enough, really, and it's smart. It doesn't need everything else being added in, if you understand what I mean. The map orientation has definitely been done intentionally. If not, then it's either a really happy accident or I don't know, but it looks like it's very, very intentional, because why else would they have it in this style? With horrible editing, this is how the map orientation should really be. So you can see that it's actually quite different, and now my theory might make more sense to you guys. Obviously, I could be wrong with all this, and it could just be, I don't know, something else or anything, but this does make a lot of sense to me. This is pretty much the way I'm seeing it, and it's not out of the question. But let me know what you guys think, because obviously, yes, I could be wrong, but I'm going by history of Games Workshop, not Creative Assembly, and this just kind of makes a lot of sense to me, especially as Old World is coming. They'll probably want to see, oh, is Khuresh going to sell his miniatures? The obvious thing when it comes to, say, for example, Cathay is, it's going to sell. That's why they decided to make Cathay here, and that's why Cathay is also going to be in Warhammer the Old World, because it's going to sell. We know this. They want to try out new different races and factions because it's going to sell more than, say, for example, Empire, this, that, and the other, because either the miniatures are already available or, you know, it's just going to be something that it's already, people already have armies and so on, you know? The thing is with the Total War Warhammer series is more race packs are definitely going to be needed eventually, as most of the races and factions that are already in game are done. There's enough DLC for a little bit, but they're going to want to milk this. They know how successful this series is. It's got, what, 20,000 plus players a day, even just for Warhammer 2, and that's pretty much almost done. They're going to want to repeat the success and more, especially with the whole eventual combination of the map, like they said. So this is going to be big money. The more they can introduce, the more they can milk. And I know the fan base wants it to be milked too. They obviously know that too, because, you know, it's money, and that's what gaming companies want. They want to milk it. The big cash cow is base games, but there's only 3 Warhammer games. We know it's a trilogy. Now it's time to hammer on the DLC. They can do more DLC for game 3 than they could for 1 and 2, simply because it's the last game. They don't have to think about anything else. Race packs would be beneficial here. Again, yes, this is theory crafting, but it makes a lot of sense. Some of the creators think so too. What are your thoughts? Let's have a bit of a discussion and see. But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description section below are various links to different social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Discord. Also in the description section is an affiliate link with Element Games where you could buy loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Making a purchase using that link and also our special code, which is also in the description, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons. Your support means the world to us. It's amazing that people want to help a small channel like us grow and get to a higher level of content. A big thank you to Gibraltar LUSC, Ryan Bertsche, Andrew Prince, and Okro for subscribing to us at our Fane level. You guys are super cool. And a big thank you to Edward Yule, VS Vasan, Aaron Whitman, and Shaggy for subscribing to us at our King level. Honestly, we can't thank you all enough. And lastly, a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing, and commenting on these videos. Honestly, it's because of you guys that the channel's been growing at such a great pace lately, so we can't thank you all enough. But with that, my friends, thank you so much for watching once again, and we shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.